I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another episode of the Get Gig Ready mini course with the Fractal Audio VP4. On today's video, I want to show you how to set up your VP4 to use it with a high gain amplifier that has an effects loop. So we're going to be talking about gain staging, we're going to be talking about the 4-cable method, and I want to show you how to set up a great sounding tight gate for modern high gain styles. I'm going to be using this Soldano Astro today, which is a multi-channel amplifier that features several different voicings. This is pretty typical of a lot of what we'd consider modern high gain, where there are multiple gain stages to create distortion. There's filtering and various other tricks involved to keep the sound tight and controlled. Unlike the amps we've looked at previously, like the Deluxe Reverb and the Marshall Plexi, these feature a master volume, and a lot of high gain amps will feature an effects send and return, which lets you insert effects like delay and reverb after the main distortion in the amplifier. So using something like the VP4, we can place certain effects like overdrives, filters, and modulations before the preamp of the high gain amplifier, and then we can use the amp to generate most of the distorted guitar sound. Then we can place effects like delay and reverb after that distortion, feed it back into the power amplifier and the cabinet. It's a fantastic way to run a modern rig. Some things that you do run into with high gain amplifiers with that much distortion is obviously going to be noise, and whether you're using something like a Soldano, a Mesa Boogie, or a modern channel switching Marshall or Rev or 5150, any of these classic high gain amps, they really come to life not only using the inbuilt distortion, but boosting that signal and filtering it from the guitar. So we're going to look at a couple of those strategies. First, I just want to give you an example of some of the sounds that this amplifier is capable of. There are 3 main gain modes on here. There's a blue, a purple, and a red mode. I'm going to be playing one of the new Ibanez guitars fitted with Fishman Fluence pickups and an Evertune bridge, which is an amazing setup for modern high gain. Now, a good rule of thumb when dialing in a high gain sound as a starting point is to turn the gain control up to the point where you get the amount of saturation that you like, that feels good to play, and then back it off ever so slightly. This will add some clarity to your tone, and then it will also set it up so that if you do want to use a boost before the preamp section on there, you can use the boost to not only add gain, but to shape the tone coming out of your guitar. So let's go over to the VP4 now, where we are going to use a drive pedal in front of this tone that I've dialed in on the red mode. We're then going to tighten everything up and take out the noise with the gate, and then we're going to add a few fun effects around that. Before we cable everything up on the VP4 to use the 4-cable method, we need to do 2 things. I'm in VP4 Edit. I've opened up an empty preset. We're going to go up to the top right and go to the Setup tab. You want to come down to the Global Settings over here and make sure that 4-cable method routing is enabled. Once you've done that, come over to your preset and go to the Mix and Routing tab. You're then going to go to Routing, and you're going to come down to 4-cable mode over here. You can either have it disabled, and you can set it up in a couple of different ways. You can have all of your effects placed after the amp. You can have a single effects block before the preamp and 3 effects in the preamp. You can have 2 and 2, 3 and 1, or all of your effects pre and no effects post. We're going to go with 2 pre, 2 post for this preset, and you'll see there is this 4 cable method icon over here. Let's talk about the connections. Now, on the back of the VP4, you can see the stereo inputs and outputs labeled. In 4 cable method though, these change their functions. So the order that I would connect these, I would take my guitar cable and plug it in to the input left over here. Then I'm going to take another cable, and this is going to go to the very front of my amplifier. This is going to come from output number 1. So output number 1 goes to your amplifier's input. Next, the effects send on your amplifier, which is going to be sending the preamp signal from your amp back to the VP4, is going to go into the right input of the VP4. So the effects send to the input right. Finally, we're going to take the right output of the VP4 and we're going to connect that to the amplifier's effects return or power amp in. From there, you can take your amplifier and connect it to a speaker cabinet, and you've got everything ready to go for 4 cable method. First thing that I want to do is I want to take my underlying guitar tone and I just want to remove a little bit of noise from it. So I'm going to place a gate after this 4 cable method icon. So this is going to place it in the effects loop of the amplifier after all the distortion has been generated. Let's just have a listen to the effect that this gate has on the overall amount of background noise that I've got. At the stock settings, that is already massively improving the amount of noise between those chugs, but we can make it even better. And we're going to do this by going to the sidechain setting of the gate. And rather than have it as the block left plus right input, we're going to set it to input 1. Now, what this is doing is it is using the DI signal of our guitar that's going into the main input of the VP4 and using that as the signal that the gate is detecting. However, the gate is placed after the 4 cable method block on here, meaning it's placed after the amp's preamp. I like to think of this setup like an early warning system for noise. The VP4 can detect any incoming noise from the guitar itself, but then it can attenuate that after the amp where all the extra distortion noise is going to be happening. So with that setup, what I like to do is turn the attack all the way down to 1 millisecond and then the release somewhere around 10 milliseconds. About a 10-to-1 ratio is a pretty good starting point on there. I then like turning the threshold on this particular guitar down to about -55. It's going to vary what you want to do. You can make the gate super tight and genty by leaving the threshold where it is, or you can make it a little more natural and open sounding by turning it down. You can also play around with the ratio. Let's go for a ratio of around 4 because I want this to be really tight. That's pretty fantastic. That's doing the job for me. You can try the modern expander as well, and you can play around with the knee type on the gate. I think these starting points are pretty good for most high gain amps and guitars though. All right, let's take this core amp tone and push it a bit further. So we're gonna add a drive block over here. I am going to click on this block just to the left of the 4 cable method icon. So we're going to be placing it before the amp's preamp. I'll drag and drop a drive block over here. Let's start out with the Horizon Precision drive. I think this is such a great sounding modern drive. I'll turn the overall drive down, the level all the way up. Let's turn the attack and the bright up on this, and let's have a listen to what this does to that already distorted guitar tone. It's really going to push it. The attack and the bright controls are going to add some lovely mids and upper mids on there. And by keeping the drive down and the level high, we're just pushing the front end of the amp into more natural distortion. that sounds a little bit too mid-focus, you can try the classic Tube Screamer. I like the Valve Screamer VS9, drive at 0, tone and level at 10. These Fishman Fluence pickups are already very mid-forward, so I might bring the tone back a little bit. Let's just have a listen to what it does. Now, there are so many other great drive types in there, like the TC integrated preamp, the Boss SD1, the Metal Zone, the Fuzz Face if you really want to get gnarly. But one thing you can do as an alternative to tightening the amp up is to kind of make it more bloaty and crazy sounding. So I like using the Pi Fuzz for that. Let's have a listen to that one quickly. Now, that's not a sound that I would use all the time, but as a character tone here and there for various parts, it can work really, really well. The octave distortion or the bit crusher are other fantastic options to make your tone super gnarly, or you could use a ring modulator or the pitch block to add some octave down effects. Speaking of the pitch block, let's add a pitch block as the very first block in line, and I'm going to use the virtual capo so that I can tune this guitar down. I'm going to leave the pitch tracking on chords. Let's go down 5 semitones over here, and I'll just add one more block over here. Let's add the delay at the end of the chain. So this is after the gate and after the amp's preamp in here. Let's just go for the analog mono type over here. I like about 600 milliseconds of delay with this type. Mix and feedback pretty much where they are. This is going to sound great for some leads, especially with that boost in front of it. And then the pitch block there I can use to make my guitar sound like an extended range guitar or a baritone. So let's turn on the drive and the delay and have a listen to that. This guitar has an Evertune. I've got it set up in the no bend mode. So I'm just going to swap over to a different guitar so that I can do some vibrato. Now, just keep in mind when you're using the virtual capo, especially at low volumes when you're practicing, you're going to hear the unamplified sound of your guitar as well as that pitch shifted guitar tone from the virtual capo, and it might be quite dissonant. At stage volumes though, there's absolutely no way that you're going to hear the unamplified sound of your guitar in there, and what you heard on there has no room sound in it, so it sounds quite natural. I also just really like using something like the analog or tape style delay in there because it's quite bandwidth limited and it doesn't really clash with your main guitar tone when you're playing leads. Now, everybody is going to have their favorite recipe when it comes to getting a great high gain tone. They're going to have their favorite guitar pick up an electronic combination in combination with different pre and post effects, and of course, different amplifiers, whether you're using something like this Soldano, whether you're using something like a classic Boogie Mark IV for a super tight sound, or the dual rectifier for more of a crushing late 90s, early 2000s tone, or you've got something like a modern 5150 variant or one of the excellent Rev amplifiers that I've featured on my channel before. You can really customize your high gain tone, and having something that complements the core sound of the amp rather than modifying it too much is crucial, which is why the VP4 is such a flexible and powerful tool. Furthermore, the VP4 has MIDI per scene, which I've done a tutorial over on my channel and will cover in a future video on this series. So if your amp has MIDI, you can change the channels and the effects all at once. You can use the VP4 as an all-in-one brain for your rig. If you've got any other questions, let me know in the comments section below. Otherwise, I will see you all on the next episode of Get Gig Ready.